Hey everyone, and welcome to We Speak here on the AFA social media channels. My name is Katrina Pilkington. I will be your host today as a AFA master instructor and also leader of these conversations solely related to equity and inclusivity in the fitness spaces that we own and are part of. This week we're going to be discussing a topic in regards to inclusivity of all bodies and all humans in the fitness space. And I'm going to be sharing this time with two colleagues of mine in the fitness industry as we discuss topics about, understanding that we are all here to serve other humans and folks, whether they have abilities, disabilities, and remembering to drop assumptions about body size, body type, body figures, understanding that we want to encourage progressions and regressions for all humans and be accepting and affirming in the spaces of which we serve others in fitness. So allow me to welcome my two guests today. We have Carlos Davila, who's back for his second episode with me. His pronouns are he, him, and his. And then I never say your last name right, Rachael.
It's all right.
Can you tell me it so I can not?
Babiracki.
Babiracki. Mm-hmm. Rachael Babiracki, whose pronouns are she, her, and hers. So allow me to introduce these two humans who decided to take the time here, which I'm very thankful for. Once again, Carlos is an adjunct professor in Brooklyn, teaching students sports psychology and intro to psychology in this space. He's also a personal trainer, CrossFit coach, understanding the intersection of both the athlete and the coach, and helping delve into topics surrounding accident exclusion, also known as microaggressions. I use that with air quotes all the time, and marginalized humans as we have different experiences going through our time in the fitness and wellness industry as folks of color. So welcome, Carlos, back.
Thank you.
And then we have Rachael, my friend, who I can never get her last name correct. Babiracki, I'm going to get it right. She holds a degree in exercise science and has been in the industry for well over 15 years. She started as a head trainer with Les Mills in 2015, and in 2020 started PHIT Society, focusing on social media and a weekly podcast to share thoughts, ideas, and education for both fitness professionals and enthusiasts, all around building a positive relationship with one's body in the fitness space and challenging people to get away from the norms of which we become used to, and empowering folks to understand that we are here to embrace ourselves and love ourselves and form more intuitive relationships with ourselves in the wellness space. So welcome, Rachael.
Yay, glad to be here.
Yay. So, we're going to delve into this topic because I always feel like these episodes go way too quickly for me. But if you both could just touch on, briefly, like how did you land in the wellness space and fitness space? And then how do you feel uniqueness when it comes to inclusivity, whether it's disabilities, abilities, capabilities, accessibility, socioeconomic differences, etc., relate to maybe your experience and experiences of those you've seen in your time. I'll let Rachael go first.
Awesome. Well, I got started in fitness really young because my parents are actually club owners. So I grew up in a gym setting, started teaching group fitness at the age of 16, became an NASM certified personal trainer at age 18, got my degree, started working for Les Mills in 11 years ago or so. So I've been involved in this industry for pretty much my entire life, and it's all I know, and I love it. And I've had my own personal experience with kind of the more challenging and dare I say some of the more toxic parts of fitness. Yeah. So I was really aware of that dichotomy of like how great it can be, but also how exclusive and hard it can be. I struggled with an eating disorder in my 20s. So it was something that was really real to me from a very young age. So as I've been continuing with my career, continuing with clients within Les Mills and with what I do on the side with my passion project with PHIT Society, it's super important to understand like how do we make fitness and wellness an inclusive space and an accessible space, because I know how wonderful it can be, and I want every person to experience that without the challenges that can come with it.
Right. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. What about yourself, Carlos?
Started at New York Sports Club as a floor trainer, kind of by mistake. Fitness was never for me something that I took as a serious career path at the time. It was something that I wanted to do while I was also finishing my degree in psychology. And as the years evolved and my roles expanded within New York Sports Club, and then that led to me, working for corporate fitness spaces, eventually working at this very medically focused, holistic health space, which significantly impacted just the level of like education and that part of that process within the realm of health and fitness, that I started to take a lot more seriously and became a lot more read and started to understand the body differently, and also understand kind of that biopsychosocial component of it, where I can give you this amazing programming, but if I'm ignoring the fact that you don't have access to certain things, or these things that I'm telling you, I'm advising you to eat, you just don't have the capacity at that time to do that, I started to think about these spaces differently. And it wasn't honestly until I delved into the boutique fitness space, which is, a little bit more on the higher end as far as the price points in those spaces. I started to kind of notice that I wasn't seeing the same faces that I was seeing when I was coaching, in Harlem, or even in the CrossFit space that I was in, which CrossFit gets its own bad name around this particular topic. But the space that I was in working out at CrossFit was also a very, diverse space. So it wasn't until I got into boutique fitness, which was a very young white female space, that the otherness of it started to become something that I was a little bit more aware of. And at that same time, getting a lot more entrenched in my own understanding of microaggressions and intersectionality, and how all of that kind of plays a role in how we present ourselves in certain spaces, and also how those spaces engage with us. I started to really like look around and like, okay, we can't say that anymore. No. We can't have these same gender type of comments around fitness, because you don't know how people are going to take that. You don't know how people are going to perceive that. And I had my own personal experiences where I felt very unseen, very unheard. And after having that experience, and also like doing a ton of research within this space, I just started to see a lot of what was around me very differently. And, it kind of, similar to the other panelists, it became a passion project, right? It became this thing where I was like, I need to figure out like how to make this better. I need to figure out ways that people in my community and people in communities that look like me, sound like me, engage like me, feel comfortable coming in these spaces, and feel comfortable coming into a space that has this amazing coach in that space, but not feel like you can't be in that space because you're not wanted, right? Or you feel you're not wanted for whatever reason.
Right. And that's what I want our viewers and those that watch this after it's been recorded to understand, is that we're trying to just open up this space to conversation and dialogue. So if you would like to ask questions of my guests today, or of myself, feel free to do so during or after the fact. And just to unpack a little bit about these terms, because a lot of the times I do work with organizations on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and anti-discriminatory practices and wellness. Breaking down the terms can be as easy as this: understanding that diversity is welcoming a variety of folks. Equity is ensuring that those folks feel that they're treated fairly across the board, depending upon what their different variations are as humans. And inclusion is all about belonging, but belonging 100% authentically. And I think for myself personally, with what I've gone through and being somebody who was a student and then a client and then getting into fitness, is understanding that I didn't always feel like I belonged, and I had to fit some sort of aesthetic. And I just spoke about this weekend at IDEA PTI at the conference there, about how biases can help us disengage from our clients, and understanding that there's so many different biases in the fitness industry that are creating assumptions. So maybe the two of you can help me unpack, and I can be very honest about some assumptions that I've seen trainers and instructors use. And I understand, because many of us have been in this industry for a long time. I know I have, and I've seen client A and B look like client C and D. So I assume that I'm going to write the same program, the same type of situation for them. But we really, especially in 2020, have hit a situation where we have to be very individualized and very compassionate to not do that anymore, and really shift that perspective to another place. How do you feel about that, Rachael?
Yeah, I think that is so important from kind of the micro level of working directly with clients or teaching classes, is really getting to know the people in your classes beyond, like you said, the assumptions or the stereotypes, and educating ourselves beyond our own experience, because I'm clearly a white woman, so I'm not going to understand the experience of people of color without doing education and research and listening to their voices. So starting to first, I think the first piece is just understanding your own experience and the strengths of it, but also the blind spots of it, and then seeking out other people that can help you with those blind spot areas, so that when you do approach a client or you're teaching a class, you can have a wider lens and a wider understanding of who might be standing in front of you, instead of those kind of very quick stereotypes that we tend to come up with. And then having the conversations with your clients and making a really safe space to be super open about those types of things, and to ask, beyond your goals, like, let's talk about your experience. Let's talk about accessibility. Let's talk about maybe some fears you may have, or some assumptions that they may have made based on their feelings of the industry that are exclusionary, and to dig into that a little more and let them know that you are a safe place where, like, hey, I'm trying to challenge this. I want you to feel really, really welcome. What do you need for that to actually happen? And I think in those conversations, that will open our eyes even wider to real tangible things that we can put into play in our careers.
Yeah, I love that, Rachel. Like, I always talk about, ask for feedback. Like, being in a very fixed, cannot be taught anything mindset is really not the place to be right now. Many of us are learning that the hard way. And it's important to get feedback from those you've worked with and be open to that feedback, maybe being a little uncomfortable or not being what you want to hear, but understanding that it comes from a place of love, because this person wants you to grow. So you might be hearing something you don't want to hear, but it's time to buck up and get some real actionable steps in place so that you can continue to evolve. How do you feel about that as well, Carlos?
I think one of the things that Rachel said that really resonated with me was this idea that we all kind of have experience as our lens, right? Whenever we're in spaces. And I think for me, it wasn't until I started to ask other people, my apologies, I started to ask other people about their experiences, and I started to realize that it wasn't just me. I wasn't the only one feeling this weirdness in certain spaces, or feeling out of place in certain spaces. So once I started to realize that that wasn't a unique experience to me, I started to pay a lot more attention to individuals that would come into my class that may have been feeling the same way, right? Like, I started doing focus groups. And again, because I was doing a lot of work on intersectionality, I was looking at Black females in this space, both as coaches and as participants. And understanding that the stories that I was hearing about coming into a space, realizing that you're the only one that looks like you there, and the pressure that puts on you, right? You can't mess up, right? You can't be the weak person in that class. Like, you can't be the one to ask the questions, right? Because now you're representing, like, the entire culture,
right?
Whether you came into that space with that backpack on, internally, that's what we're going to see when we're like, wait, I'm the only one here. Nah, I can't mess up. And that inherently is going to create this negative experience that you may not even be aware of, right? You're leaving that space and you're like, nah, I'm not going back to that. I'm not feeling that.
That's why representation is such an issue, right?
Exactly, right? And a big part of that is, the whole, like, one of the things that I love about the space that I work at is that I don't have to figure out who someone is. We have a sheet with everyone's name right next to where our little station is in the studio. So I always know if I'm trying to figure out, like, wait, am I saying him? Am I saying her? Am I saying they? Like, no, I'm just calling you by your name, right? And I'm huge just because my last name gets butchered all the time. I'm going to ask you, like I say this with my students as well. If I say your name wrong, I am completely okay with you telling me that I'm mispronouncing your name. And so people a lot of times are like, wait, what? Exactly, right? Getting Rachel's last name, right? She didn't take that personal because she knew it wasn't coming from a place of, I don't respect you enough to figure out your name, right? I tell my students all the time, like, I'm trying. If I mess up your name, like, please let me know. It's not intentional. But that's because I've experienced a lot of those things. And I started to realize that those experiences, unfortunately, aren't unique to me.
Right. And it's about understanding that to Rachel's point too, and your point, Carlos, that you're trying to build relationships. You're not building a clientele. You're not building a portfolio. You're not building a profit. All of that will come. You're building relationships first and foremost. So what I see a lot of fitness professionals do is what I did, right? Getting certified in all the things and wanting to do all the things technically, but technicality isn't how you learn. I always live by the Albert Einstein quote of the greatest source of knowledge is experience. So experiencing, building relationships, creating relationships with colleagues and clientele. But just to kind of speak specifically to a certain topic on inclusivity, I know that I've done a few We Speak episodes on bias, and I've also done a few on flexibility with accessibility and pricing. So please go back and watch those if you're looking for some ways to be creative in those spaces to be cognizant of folks. But one of the things I want to discuss on this episode, I do have a great friend, Ilya, who is Decolonizing Fitness on Instagram. If you want to follow them, they're an amazing human I learned so much from. But the word affirming, right? Creating spaces that are affirming, not just places where you're okay to be existent or you're okay to come in, but all body sizes and all body shapes and all skin tones and all races and all ethnicities should be welcomed and affirmed for who they are in a space of fitness and wellness. It's no longer about the trends and the diet culture, which will be the next topic we talk about. I know that Rachel's huge on discussing. So how do y'all feel, or what do y'all feel are some things that instructors and trainers can think about when it comes to helping spaces feel more of a place of belonging? Like for me, the one thing I will say is understanding that throwing away the assumptions is key and getting to know your folks is key. Offering progressions and regressions that fit where they feel comfortable. Don't say something's easier, harder for men, for women, just whatever is working for that person. You got to trust them that they're doing their best and stop pushing them to be dying and sweating on the floor. That's not the goal. So what about you, Rachel?
Yeah. And I would just second Decolonizing Fitness is an incredible space where I've learned a lot in an experience that is not my own. And I think as a fitness professional, looking at our sphere of influence, so within coaching, whether it's with clients or with classes, to be really mindful of the language we're using. Is it inclusive of all different types of genders, all different types of races and ethnicities, all different types of sexualities? Like, I find in motivational cues a lot, sometimes those stereotypes will come out and we don't even necessarily realize it. It's not like we're intentionally being exclusionary, but that's where sometimes some stereotypes and things can start to come to the surface. So that's a place to maybe be reflective of what type of coaching am I utilizing? How am I motivating my people? How can I make this more inclusive to the diversity in front of me? And then also I think beyond the classroom, beyond, the client session, to have discussions with management of, whether you're at a big box club or a boutique or a smaller studio or whatever you're at, like, is the location itself accessible? Do we have locker rooms that are accessible to different gender identities? Do we have accessibility for different abilities? Like those types of conversations, again, assuming good intent, a lot of people maybe just haven't thought of that space because it's not their personal experience. So we can be a voice within our companies too, to say, hey, have we thought about this? In the online space, we're having a discussion within Les Mills of like, how can we add closed captioning? How can we think of other things that we just didn't think of at first, that, oh, actually that would increase accessibility and, to your point, be affirming to people so that they don't have to ask to be included, that we're providing the tools and the resources to show them that they belong because it is built for them.
Which you can do closed captioning on this video on Facebook. I want to make sure that you know that you can do that. And that's so true. And I always say this all the time when it comes to diversification, you learn the most from those most different from you. So if you don't know how to make a space inclusive for this human, that human, and all the different humans that are beautifully different in our world, ask and look for resources that fit those different dimensions of humans so that you can do the right thing. But, to your point, Rachel, like understanding that when you cue and when you motivate, watching appropriation, watching the way you say things and watching what you have said for 10 years, it's time to change it up anyway, right? But, how do you feel about that, Carlos?
I once again want to emphasize Decolonizing Fitness. If you're not on there currently, please, I love the site. Amazing site. But I think for me, and I'll try to keep this example brief, it's about representation, right? We hear this term all the time, representation matters. So real quick story. I lived in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, and I knew that there was a CrossFit box about to open in my area. And I know the history of CrossFit. I know how it's always been this weirdly, not very inclusive space. But it's also a space that I've been in for about 10 to 15 years at that point. So when I saw that the box was opening, I literally walked there the first day it was open. I was like, look, I've been coaching for about 10 years. I have my certification, yada, yada. I'll work here for free for my membership or whatever. I just need the people in this area to see someone that looks like them in this space, right? Because the two owners were two older white men. And at first there was some hesitation. Luckily, one of the owners knew me from my competitive days within CrossFit. So we had that rapport, we had that relationship, and he understood what I was trying to do, right? That led to me purposely working out with one of those garage gyms in the middle of the day with the garage door open so that as folks were walking by, they saw someone that looked like them, sounded like them, wore the clothes that they wore, listened to the music that they listened to, that felt comfortable being in this space. That eventually led to a community class that really brought the community in. And, things have changed a little bit post-COVID, but that was one of those spaces where I felt was the most inclusive CrossFit space that I've been to in a really long time. And that was because the understanding of that has to be the case. Like you can't bring this very gentrified feeling space into the middle of this neighborhood and just kind of have it be there as this separate kind of entity that's coming to the neighborhood. And there was a very easy
getting in there. Right.
Yeah, like you already have someone in the community who is established within that community, and it became this really amazing sort of almost a social experiment. One of the things, because I know that we talk a little bit about how that translates to something in a more digital space. I love being able to see people's pronouns now, right? And I think that's a very sort of new age way of getting humans to feel a lot more comfortable with making it clear, like, no, this is how I want you to address me. It actually, in a weird way, makes it easier, right? Because I can easily ask, hey, humans, if you want your name to be said, I've had people that have put their names phonetically, which I'm like, I love you so much. Don't ever not take my class again. Because I love the fact that we're now aware that we control how we're responded to, right? Like if I want humans to understand that my last name is Davila, not Davila, well, I'm going to emphasize the hell out of that A when I'm writing my name.
It's going to take me about
we now have
15 times, but I come from a good place.
And you know what? It's where the heart is, all right? It's where it's coming from, and I know it's coming from a good place. But it's one of those things where we have the power now in a weird way because everything is so digital, and you have the opportunity to literally define how you're communicated with. It kind of makes that part a little bit easier.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. Like not, I can say commanding respect, but demanding respect for who you are as a human. I say the word human all the time. Some friends this weekend said that they started saying it just because I say it, because I don't want to exclude anyone. So as fitness professionals, I know many of you watching know that what the truth that the three of us speak about is just not wanting anyone to feel left out, because that's never our intent, but being really open to unpacking what has been done for how long, and it's time for us to kind of shift to a different direction in order to really make a difference, because our goal should ultimately be, right, like to really knock down these chronic health issues that we're seeing and help those folks that need help the most. And just before we close out, because I know I want to touch on this topic of diet culture and, getting away from understanding, yes, you have programming, yes, you have CEUs, yes, you've been taught certain things with continuing education, but yes, if you've been in the fitness space like I have for almost 3 decades, you probably have been the victim or have been the proponent of a lot of diet culture that we need to debunk, right, Rachel?
Oh, yes. And I'll try to be brief because I could probably talk about this for days. I think within the lens of this conversation, it's the first step is to recognize that diet culture is a symptom of other systems in play that cause exclusion. So a great book that if you're interested to learn more about like the history of diet culture and a lot of the norms that we're used to, where they came from, is Fearing Black Body by Sabrina Strings. Diet culture has roots within racism. It has roots within patriarchy. It's kind kind of not great in a lot of different ways. So understanding that wider lens then helps us understand, like, okay, why do I need to challenge these things that I have been taught and have been the norms for so long? Because I think, especially if, you know, whatever your identity is, especially if you're like a white person, if you're straight, if you're, you know, these things that are considered the quote unquote norm, or the traditional lens, maybe is a better way of putting it, it can be hard to understand why you're being asked to change your language, or why you're being asked to challenge these thoughts and these things that are considered accepted and normal. And so getting to understand the history of it, and that it's a lot deeper than, you know, the surface level issues that sometimes it can be boiled down to, is super important, so that we understand the importance of challenging it. Because I think it can be really easy to try and, you know, push it off as not that big of a deal when it actually is a really big deal. And the more you get into it, the more you realize, like, oh, it to your point, Kat, it affects me too, right? It affects all of us. And when you start to see that, then it's like, oh, wow, okay, yeah, we do really need to really challenge this. So
And I had this conversation with a colleague this week, and I'm very open and transparent about my story, which I know you are as well, Rachel. But, you know, me getting into fitness started with me trying to fit an aesthetic. I saw this thin, white aesthetic that I was trying to fit and fill, and that's never going to be an aesthetic that I'm ever going to meet. So yeah, I got thinner, but I got thinner unhealthily. So was the thinner me, who weighed less, healthier than the bigger me that was actually just a little bit lost and not knowing how to get healthy? No. So size does not indicate health. Diets don't indicate long-term goal achievement at all. And we've really got to get to a place of just acceptance and love, and teaching folks healthy habits to help them take back their health in their own way that's unique to them, period. And not about fitting any type of stereotype, not about meeting any kind of light, fat-free, you know, version of themselves. I don't want to be light. Like, I want to be myself. That's what I ended up discovering after going through the 90s. So, but my biggest thing is thanking the two of you for being here for, I know, a very brief but very loaded conversation of needed information. And where can folks find you on social and connect further to keep this conversation going? 1, 2, 3.
I'll go with that. Sure. Thanks, Carlos. Yeah, you can find me. I am on Facebook, but I'm not super active. I'm trying to be a little bit better about it. But Instagram is my main place. So Rachael Babs is my personal account. And then PHIT Society, it's PHIT, is my passion project, where we post a lot about diet culture and the intersections of all the different ways that this shows up.
Awesome. Thank you. And you, Carlos Davila?
I'm also on Facebook, but I'm never on there. It's a very different world. So my IG is Babalos, Babalos, and you can find pretty much everything about me on there. I do have a passion project I'm working on that I'm going to have an ancillary page for, but I'll announce that soon.
Awesome. So yes, definitely keep in touch. And I know many of us, these two included, are open to dialogue and conversation. I'm like Oprah. I'm all about having a conversation. So having conversations, albeit uncomfortable many times, and asking questions in safe spaces is how we make progress as a collective community, right? So I look forward to continued conversations with these two humans and all of you out there as we continue to have these We Speak episodes to talk about equity and inclusivity. So thank you for joining us this week, and I will see everyone next week.